Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Marie Laveau continued, and this is, now she's passed on. So we're on to sort of the cemetery, the area, I guess. And New Orleans, built on swampland, it means that obviously the tombs were not underground, they were above ground because they didn't want the bodies to resurface and float away. What's important to note is back then though, it usually meant that only the rich were put in these sorts of tombs and the poor was down, they were just put in a ground, yeah. But I mean, it's not like that now and it's not used like that now, but that's what it was back then. Only the elaborate crypts and tombs were for those of money. Marie, people came together to make sure she got a beautiful tomb, very decorative in works and sculptures. There's adorned plots that are just beautiful, and apparently they appear like little cities, hence the nickname Cities of the Dead or City of the Dead. These cemeteries, they attract a lot of visitors each year. Marie's gravesite is part of the New Orleans geography because it's a very powerful space and it turned into a pilgrim site. People from all over the world visit and interact over the years. Speculation, though, has been thrown about whether she actually does reside there in that particular plot. This is because of the vault in St. Louis Cemetery number 2, where locals insist she is buried, and I do believe it does have a name called the Tomb of Widowed Paris, which, if you remember, she was Widow Paris after Jacques Paris was assumed dead. The locals insist that is where she's buried. It's really important to note that factual evidence, the obituary states, she is in Tomb 1, Cemetery 1, she is in that tomb. It's also said that it is actually possible her family moved her body from Cemetery 1 to the Wishing Vault at Cemetery 2. But there's no records at all for that vault or Cemetery number 2, in that space in particular. There's no records to say he was actually buried there. But it's known as the Widower of Paris's vault, the grave vault area. So I'm not sure, but there's no actual evidence. The obituary does state that she's in Tomb 1. Cemetery 1, the middle tomb. So these are probably just legends, I'm not sure. There's other legends as well that she was moved somewhere else. There's also a legend of the unmarked grave in Cemetery 2 with nothing but crosses on it and offerings, voodoo offerings that are left there. I mean, they are left at 1 and 2, but there's an unmarked grave at number 2 where, looking at it, looks like it's a Marie site, but it's an unmarked grave. It has nothing on it. So, who knows? But the obituary, the evidence states she's laid to rest in Cemetery 1 in the middle tomb. Remember, there are others buried around her because they couldn't afford. So this is when she had money though. We have to remember as well that she was okay for money when Christophe was around, but as soon as Christophe died, he left her destitute. She was fine when he was there, but when he left her destitute. That's why others ended up paying for her tomb. Yet she'd paid for so many others to be laid around her. So, yeah, we find that interesting. Because then you've got the story of, well, if others paid for her elaborate tomb, was it just a basic tomb that was paid for? That's why they laid the others around it, And the actual funeral cost wasn't paid for. So it brings about a bit of speculation there to actually understanding it, doesn't it? It's hard to note. During the 1980s was when the site was seen as a place to bring people to visit, This is when it became sort of a tourist attraction and you had tourist guides and things. They had the gift of the gab. So that's why so many stories emerged from their tales, from these tourist people tales. And all this changed, unfortunately, on December the 24th, 2013. Not so far back, guys. There was a post, and it was on Facebook, and I do believe her name is Dorothy Morrison. She's an occult writer. She's a very esteemed occult writer. Of a disturbing discovery that she made. Someone had painted on Marie's tomb pastel pink, and there was quite disgust in that. and she made the request for the person to be found whom had actually done it. You see, the tombs in that cemetery were maintained by family members. So many of those graves now and tombs and stuff, they are actually orphaned. No one maintains them. The last family member buried apparently was in 1957 that was linked back to Marie Laveau. So since then, no one's been responsible for taking care of the tomb. As a result, it's quite often they go without restoration. So it's quite sad, but yeah. And there was very, very much a spark of, oh, that's so disgusting and how dreadful. But if we look at pink as a colour in voodoo, it's actually quite symbolic, and it means nothing short of true honour and true friendship and true love and a coming together of the community. So some saw it as a positive thing and some saw it as a bad thing. So after this, and because the graves were obviously not being upkept because they were orphaned, many of the people were dead, this brought about, I do believe it was what's it called? Save Our Cemeteries. It's what was brought together, it was formed so that Marie's tomb could have restoration, and it was restored and revealed 2014 on Halloween Day. Mr. Barrett brought a story. This is a story forwarded, but apparently Mr. Barrett believes this story could be true, you know. Whether it is or not, we don't know. So let's say, I'm not going to mention names, but someone wanted the tomb to be cut off from any access. And this is what he was petitioning for, to completely cut off the tomb from any access of people, no worshippers, no way to honour her. He woke up the next morning with his bedroom full of snakes. And after that, he encountered a lot of cottonmouths wherever he went, including apparently one turning up in his fridge. Yeah, it's a story. There are many stories like it, but I do find them interesting. The cemetery itself was cut off from public access, as we know, altogether, and you can only visit Marie's grave now, and it requires you to have a tour guide and probably pay a lot of money, which is sad because she wouldn't agree with that. Looking at Marie as a person, I don't think she'd agree with that. I think she would want people to be able to visit and honour her on their own terms, but it is what it is. Now, apparently, it's said that the very beginning, many women would go and they would put 3 cross marks on Marie's tomb by using broken red bricks from nearby graves. And these crosses are not apparently traditional in voodoo, some say, and it's said tourists brought them. However, it's important to note that that couldn't be so, because the women that traditionally would do this was before all this came about, the tourist attraction and stuff. Now, in Haitian voodoo, it's called, I think, if I pronounce it right, the Quashum, or Quashuim, something like that. I can't get it right, but it's something like that is what a cross is called, the Quashum. And it signifies a point of power, but it's well known for Marie did. Marie marked the ground with 3 crosses near graves when she was doing conjuring work, and then you would knock on the tomb 3 times. So it could be a tradition that even came from her, you know. Putting crosses on graves is a sign of devotion and to honour her. But remember, it's now illegal. That's actually now called desecration of graves. Back then it wasn't. It was a way to honour her and show devotion. Now it's, you just get arrested for it because it's illegal. Because, you know, they control everything, that being one aspect. There are other stories of 3 beautiful ladies who would enter the Louisiana cemetery, and they would knock on each tomb as they passed 3 times. They would take red brick dust and they would put on Marie's tomb 3 red crosses. Then they would knock on her tomb 3 times. They would then whisper their intentions to Marie Laveau and leave her offerings and walk away. This is known as the wishing ritual. And of course it can't be done anymore because you would have to get to the grave, you would have to put your brick dust on it, you know. It's not done like that anymore. It's done a very different way. But that is the basic of Marie's life. We have completed Marie's life. There is nothing on her childhood. There's nothing on her daughter's childhood. There is nothing to state she had a successor. There is really quite contradicting stories regarding what she practiced, but she definitely incorporated both, is my belief. She incorporated both, and I think she had true faith in both. Even whether she was the voodoo queen has been speculated. They believe it could have been this other woman, and they were mixed up. And women like them would not come forth and say, you are wrong. Another point to make is please remember that many people would call Marie a woman of colour, which is not right. We don't use that now. But the point is, she actually wasn't, believe it or not. So, well, many people state she wasn't. Her friends state she wasn't. People that grew up around her state she wasn't. So it's interesting to look at it all and think, well, are we ever going to know the truth? I can't say we are, because it's long gone. I can only give you the evidence of what's there, which I've given you: birth certificates, death certificates, times, and what's in obituaries. What's been written in news articles cannot be taken as fact, remember. The news is pretty good at mixing things up. Whether you want to learn about voodoo magic is entirely up to you. I'll probably bring some. Why not? Um, it makes me chuckle just thinking about it, because I'm thinking, oh, I can imagine these people trying this stuff. But yeah, things are done very differently now anyway. You know, things have been taken out, made illegal, so we have to do them differently. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our life. I'm sure you have. I know I have, and I will look at it very differently after doing all the research that I've done. And I've handwritten everything that I've written. If anybody wants the information that I've handwritten, all you have to do is email me and you can have it. I'll send you the book, my handwritten books that I've done. I do not mind. I'll send them you for free. Everything that I do, I handwrite. I take notes or I handwrite it in a way that it can be reused. So honestly, if anyone's interested in any handwritten works that I've done on any of my channels, ask me. Just ask me. I'm happy to send. Anyway, guys, many blessings. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and the next any Udo upload after this will be about magic. Thanks, guys.